The morning sky of New Valara had been a brilliant shade of purple, just like every other peaceful day. The crystalline spires that housed the research colony caught the twin suns and scattered it into rainbow patterns across the metal walkways. Children played in the gardens while their parents worked in the laboratories, studying the unique mineral formations that made their world so valuable to galactic science. Then the swarm fell from the sky like black rain. Advisor Thelanara was reviewing data charts when the first explosions shook her tower. Through the transparent walls, she saw something that froze her crystalline heart. Thousands of dark shapes poured from massive organic ships that had appeared without warning. The creatures moved with horrible purpose, their 6 legs carrying them across the settlement faster than any Valerian could run. "Emergency Protocol 7, she shouted into her communicator, her voice cracking with harmonics of pure terror. "All civilians to underground shelters immediately." The insectoids were unlike anything in the galactic database. Each one was the size of a hover car, with razor-sharp limbs that could slice through metal like paper. Their chittering voices created a sound like breaking glass mixed with static electricity. Worse, they moved with perfect coordination. Like fingers on a single hand, Thelanara watched helplessly as her people's beautiful spires crumbled.
Ow.
The creatures didn't just destroy, they consumed. Metal, crystal, even the synthetic materials of their technology disappeared into the swarm's maws. They were strip mining the entire colony in real time. "The evacuation pods," she whispered, turning to her communications officer. "Are they away?" "Only 40% made it to orbit before the swarm ships arrived," came the devastating reply. "The rest are trapped in the shelters." Through her observation window, she could see the creatures working with terrifying efficiency. Some group dug massive tunnels with their acid-secreting mandibles. Others hauled away chunks of refined metal and crystal. A few larger specimens, easily twice the size of the workers, stood guard with weapons that looked grown rather than built. "The signal," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sounds of destruction. "Send it to everyone." The communications officer's crystalline fingers danced across the control panel, broadcasting on all emergency frequencies. "Advisor. Maximum subspace range." The distress beacon shot into the void, carrying their desperate message across light years in seconds. Somewhere out there, monitoring stations would receive their plea. The Galactic Council, the major empires, the trade federations. Surely someone would come. Hours crawled by like wounded animals. The swarm continued its methodical destruction, now boring deep into the planet's crust. Thelanara counted the responses. As they trickled in, the Galactic Council's automated system acknowledged receipt of their distress call. Estimated response time: 6 standard cycles. A committee would be formed to study the situation and recommend appropriate diplomatic channels. The Altarian Empire's response was even more bureaucratic. They suggested filing Form 774 to be for emergency assistance, which would be processed within 30 business days. Additional paperwork might be required. The Centauri Federation offered their thoughts and prayers, along with a helpful pamphlet on conflict resolution through meditation. 3 more responses came in, all variations of "We're very sorry but cannot assist at this time due to prior commitments." The Regeline Commercial Consortium offered to purchase salvage rights to the colony ruins at competitive rates. Thelanara felt her hope crystallizing into despair. This was how civilized species died, buried under paperwork while lawyers debated. Jurisdiction? Far across the galaxy. Captain Kim Ji-woo stood on the bridge of the human destroyer Soul's Edge. The ship was old by galactic standards, built for speed rather than comfort. Her crew of 37 humans had been patrolling the Rim territories for 6 months, keeping trade routes safe from pirates and raiders. "Sir, we're receiving a priority distress signal," reported Lieutenant Park Minji from the communications station. Her fingers flew across the holographic controls, filtering through the static. "It's from the Velarin system, Outer Rim. Looks like a colony under attack." Ji-woo studied the tactical display that materialized above the bridge. Red dots marked hostile contacts, while blue showed friendly forces. The blue section was disturbingly empty. "What's the nature of the attack?" "Unknown hostile force," Large numbers? The signal is fragmenting, but I'm reading massive casualties and structural damage. Mingy paused, her face grim. Captain, they're not asking for negotiations or aid supplies. They're screaming for immediate military assistance. Juwu felt something cold settle in her stomach. She'd heard that kind of desperation before, during the border wars of her youth. This wasn't a political dispute or a trade disagreement. This was survival. How far? 12 hours at maximum burn, Captain? Round the bridge, her crew was already moving before she gave the order. Chief Engineer Ko Temin began rerouting power to the engines. Weapons Officer Lim Naong started charging the ship's defensive systems. Navigator Shin Minho plotted the fastest possible course. Set course immediately. Signal the fleet. The Soul's Edge turned on its axis like a hunting predator catching a scent. Its engines flared to life, pushing the destroyer toward maximum velocity. Within minutes, 7 more human vessels peeled away from their patrol routes. Following Jiu's lead, deep in space, Admiral Li Doyan felt the vibration through the deck plates of his flagship as the Bison's Thunder changed course. The massive battleship could carry 2,000 Marines and enough firepower to level a small moon. Right now, it was burning through space faster than most courier ships. Admiral, Captain Kim's signal confirms hostile contact in the Velarin. Siston, reported his communications officer. Multiple species have acknowledged the distress call, but we're the only ones actually responding. Li Doyan studied the tactical holograms showing the positions of various fleets across the sector. Council ships were days away and showing no signs of movement. The major empires were similarly motionless, so the Deathworlders heard it first, he muttered, a grim smile crossing his weathered face. Good. The ground beneath Shelter Complex 7 shook as something massive passed overhead. Through the reinforced crystal walls, Thelanara could see the shadows of enormous ships blocking out the purple sky. The other survivors pressed against the viewing ports, their crystalline bodies flickering with nervous energy. Are those more? Swarm vessels, whispered Dr. Veltar, clutching his research notes against his chest. Thelanara sensors were already working, scanning the new arrivals. 8 ships hung in the atmosphere like predators sizing up their prey. But these weren't the organic, twisted forms of the swarm vessels. These were sleek metal constructs with sharp angles and weapon ports that glowed with barely contained energy. Unknown vessels, this is New Valara Colony. Please identify yourselves, she transmitted, her voice carrying the formal tones required. By Galactic Protocol. The response came back immediately. No delays for diplomatic consultation or committee approval. The voice was rough, speaking in heavily accented galactic standard with an edge that suggested violence was always an option. New Valara, this is Admiral Li Doyan of the Human Expeditionary Fleet. We received your distress call. What's your tactical situation? Thelanara's crystalline form flickered between colors as confusion and hope warred within her. Humans. She had heard whispers about them in the diplomatic circles of the inner worlds. The Deathworlders from the Rim territories, creatures so violent that most civilized species avoided contact with them entirely. The stories painted them as barely controlled savages who had somehow mastered space travel. Their homeworld was described as a nightmare realm of crushing gravity, poisonous atmosphere, and predators that would terrify a council marine. The humans themselves were said to be pack hunters who solved every problem with overwhelming force. But they had come. When the Council sent automated responses, and the empires sent bureaucrats. The humans had sent warships. Admiral, we are under attack by an unknown swarm species. They have overrun 70% of our surface installations. We have approximately 4,000 civilians in emergency shelters. Our defensive forces were completely overwhelmed within the first hour. Understood. What's the enemy count and disposition? Thelanara quickly consulted her remaining sensor networks. Approximately 50,000 individual hostiles, ranging from worker class to what appear to be warrior variants. They're supported by at least 12 large vessels in orbit. They seem to be strip mining our installations rather than simply destroying them. Copy that, we're coming down. The transmission cut off, leaving the shelter in tense silence. The crystal walls, they could see the human ships moving with predatory grace. Smaller vessels detached from the larger ones like hunting hounds being released from their leashes. 20 dropships screamed through the atmosphere, their heat shields glowing red-hot as they punched through the swarm's defensive fire. The alien ships tried to intercept them, launching swarms of smaller attack craft. But the human vessels moved like they were alive. Weaving between incoming fire with impossible precision, Captain Yunsu gripped the crash restraints as her dropship bucked and rolled through defensive maneuvers. Around her, 30 Marines in powered armor checked their weapons one final time. The armor made them look like mechanical giants, each suit standing over 2 meters tall and bristling with weapon systems. 60 seconds to drop, announced the pilot over the intercom. LZ is hot. Expect immediate contact. Through the dropship's viewports, Sue could see New Valara's surface rushing up to meet them. What had once been a beautiful research colony now looked like a battlefield from hell. Crystalline buildings lay in ruins, their shattered remains glittering like broken glass. The swarm creatures moved in dark rivers across the landscape, their chittering voices audible even through the ship's hull. "Remember the briefing?" Sue called out to her Marines over the comm system. "These bugs work as a hive mind. Take out the big ones first. They're probably the command nodes. Watch each other's backs and keep moving. These things are fast." The dropship's retro thrusters fired, slamming everyone against their restraints. As the craft came to a hovering stop 10 meters above the ground, the rear ramp dropped with a hydraulic hiss, revealing the chaos below. Sue's boots hit Valerian soil just as explosions lit the horizon, where other dropships were making their own landings. The air tasted of smoke and something acidic that made her eyes water even through her armor's filtration system. The swarm creatures were everywhere, a living carpet of chitinous bodies and razor-sharp limbs that moved with horrifying coordination. "Contact front," shouted Sergeant Namehuck as his squad's heavy weapons opened fire. The sound was deafening, continuous roar of explosive rounds and energy beams that turned the nearest swarm creatures into smoking fragments. But for every creature that fell, 2 more seemed to take its place. They poured out of tunnel entrances and drop pod craters, their acid green eyes fixed on the human landing zones with predatory intelligence. The humans didn't behave like any species the swarm had encountered before. Where other races would establish defensive perimeters and call for orbital support, the humans did something completely unexpected. They attacked Sue, led her squad in a charging advance that would have been considered suicidal by Council military doctrine. But her Marines moved with fluid precision, their powered armor allowing them to leap over obstacles and absorb impacts that would crush lesser species. Their weapons carved through the swarm ranks like plasma through ice. "Flank left." "Flank left," called Corporal Park Sunho, as he spotted a group of larger swarm creatures trying to surround them. These were the warrior variants twice the size of the workers, bone-white carapaces and mandibles that dripped corrosive fluid. The Marines adapted instantly, splitting into fire teams that supported each other while maintaining forward momentum. Where other species would have retreated to establish defensive positions, the humans pressed forward aggressively, turning the battle into a running fight that played to their strengths. Down in Shelter Complex 7, Thelanara watched through her remaining sensor networks as the Deathworlders fought with terrifying efficiency. They didn't just repel the swarm, they hunted it. Small teams of humans moved through the ruins like apex predators, seeking out the larger command creatures and eliminating them with surgical precision. "By the Crystal Throne," whispered Dr. Veltar watching the tactical display, "they're actually winning." For the first time in days, hope began to flicker in Thelanara's crystalline heart. The humans had heard their call, and they had come not with paperwork or diplomatic protocols, but with weapons and the will to use them. Maybe, just maybe, some of her people would live to see another purple dawn. The swarm collective mind reeled in confusion as reports flooded in from across the battlefield. For the first time in 12 conquered worlds, their perfect coordination was failing. These new enemies, these humans, refused to follow any logical pattern of warfare. In the twisted tunnels beneath New Valara's surface, Captain Yunsu moved. like a ghost through spaces that would have crushed the bones of most galactic species. The swarm had carved these passages for their own use, making them barely 2 meters high and filled with acidic vapors that ate through standard atmospheric suits. But human-powered armor was built for the crushing depths of Earth's ocean floors and the toxic storms of Mars colonies. Its motion sensors picking up a large chamber ahead, whispered Private Kim Taeon through the CUM system. His armor's sensors painted a three-dimensional map in Sue's helmet display, showing a vast, hollow space filled with moving heat signatures. Sue held up a closed fist, and her 6 Marine squad froze instantly. Years of training on Earth's most dangerous terrain had taught them to move as one organism. Reading each other's body language, even through meters of armor plating, she switched to hand signals, pointing toward the chamber entrance and holding up 3 fingers. The breeding chamber was a nightmare of organic architecture. Pulsing walls secreted a thick, amber-colored fluid that hardened into protective shells around developing swarm larvae. Hundreds of egg sacs hung from the ceiling like grotesque fruit, while worker drones scuttled between them, tending to the next generation of colony devourers. Demolition charges set, reported Corporal Ogina from her position deep within the hive structure. She had crawled through ventilation shafts that were barely wide enough for her armor, placing explosive charges at key structural points with the precision of a surgeon, collapsing their primary breeding chamber in 30 seconds. The swarm finally detected the human presence, but their response was sluggish and confused. Worker drones abandoned their posts and rushed toward the intruders, but they moved individually rather than in their usual coordinated waves. Something was interfering with their hive connection, making them act like lost children. Fire in the hole. Gina's voice crackled through the CUM as the charges detonated simultaneously. The breeding chamber collapsed in a controlled implosion that sent shockwaves through the entire tunnel network. Thousands of developing larvae died instantly, along with their guardian drones. Above ground, the battle raged with equal intensity, but different tactics. Commander Kong Jian coordinated the orbital strikes from his position aboard the destroyer Soul's Edge. But these weren't the massive bombardments that other species might have used. Each shot was precisely calculated to disable rather than destroy. "Target that command ship's propulsion system," he ordered, highlighting a swarm vessel on the tactical display. "I want it crippled, not vaporized." The Soul's Edge fired a single particle beam that sliced through the alien ship's biomechanical engines like a scalpel. The vessel began spinning out of control, its organic hull venting atmosphere and strange fluids into space. "Boarding shuttles away," reported the flight controller. The human boarding shuttle attached itself to the disabled swarm ship like a parasite finding a host. Cutting torches burned through the alien hull, creating an entry point for the assault team. Lieutenant Esioben led 12 Marines through the breach, their weapons ready. For close-quarters combat, the interior of the swarm ship was like stepping inside a living creature. The walls pulsed with a rhythmic heartbeat, and bioluminescent nodes provided an eerie green light. Strange fluids dripped from overhead surfaces that looked more grown than built. "Atmosphere is breathable but toxic," reported Marine Specialist Zhong Hoyin, reading his suit's environmental sensors. "Heavy concentration of pheromone compounds." Esioben nodded grimly. The boarding team fought their way through defending drones that seemed increasingly confused and disorganized. The creatures attacked individually rather than in coordinated groups, making tactical mistakes that the humans exploited ruthlessly in the ship's central chamber. They found what they were looking for, a collection of organic computing nodes that pulsed with the same rhythm as the ship's walls. Dr. Yuyuna, the fleet's chief xenobiologist, began taking samples immediately. "These creatures communicate through pheromone signals," she reported over the CUM system, her voice tight with excitement. "Complex chemical messages that coordinate their actions across vast distances. If I can analyze the molecular structure, ours." Past as the human fleet systematically dismantled the swarm's invasion force. Each captured ship provided more intelligence, each destroyed breeding chamber weakened their coordination. Dr. Yu worked frantically in her mobile laboratory, breaking down the alien pheromone codes like a cryptographer cracking an enemy cipher. "I've got it," she announced finally. I can synthesize a disruption compound that will jam their communication network. It's like static in a radio signal. They won't be able to coordinate their attacks anymore. The counterattack began immediately. Human ships released clouds of synthetic pheromones that spread through the swarm ranks like invisible poison. The effect was immediate and devastating. Creatures that had moved with perfect unity suddenly became individual animals, confused and frightened. Some swarm drones simply stopped moving, standing motionless as their connection to the hive mind was severed. Others began attacking each other, their primitive individual instincts overriding their collective purpose. The largest warrior variants fled toward their ships. Abandoning the smaller creatures to their fate, Admiral Lee Do-yeon stood in the Bison's Thunder's command center, watching the tactical display as red enemy contacts winked out one by one. The swarm ships were retreating into hyperspace, leaving behind thousands of abandoned drones that wandered aimlessly across New Valara's surface. "Sir, we're receiving surrender signals from the remaining ground forces," reported his communications officer. They're trying to surrender individually." Lee nodded grimly. Without their hive connection, the creatures had reverted to basic survival instincts. They were no longer an unstoppable swarm, just frightened animals trapped far from home. "All units, begin search and rescue operations," he ordered. "I want every Valerian civilian accounted for." Medical teams to the surface immediately. Across the planet, human marines emerged from the tunnel networks like warriors returning from the underworld. Their armor was scorched and dented, but they moved with the satisfaction of predators who had successfully defended their territory. The Deathworlders had done more than respond to the distress call they had won. And in winning, they had shown the galaxy something that the Council's diplomatic protocols could never achieve. Sometimes the only answer to violence was superior violence, applied with surgical precision by those who understood both war and mercy. The morning sun cast long shadows across New Valara's reconstruction sites when the Council fleet finally arrived. 12 pristine white vessels dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the kind of polish that came from never seeing real combat. Admiral Vexterin, a tall reptilian saurian with ceremonial scales that marked his diplomatic rank, stood on his flagship's bridge, expecting to find either smoking ruins or a new human occupation force. Instead, his sensors showed something that made no sense, according to galactic politics. Human construction mechs worked side by side with Valerian repair drones, rebuilding the crystalline spires with a precision that impressed even his engineering staff. Medical tents bore both human and Valerian symbols. While mixed teams of scientists studied the abandoned swarm technology scattered across the planet's surface, "Admiral, I'm detecting no hostile activity," reported his tactical officer, a young Centauri who couldn't hide his confusion. "The human fleet is maintaining defensive positions, but their weapons are powered down." Vextarin, his forked tongue flicked out nervously. In his 50 years of council service, he had never encountered humans who weren't either shooting at someone or preparing to shoot at someone. These Deathworlders were supposed to be savage conquerors who left only destruction in their wake. "Open a channel to the human fleet commander," he ordered. The main view screen flickered to life, showing Admiral Lee Do-yeon on the bridge of his battleship. The human looked exactly like the intelligence reports described: scarred face, cold eyes, and the kind of presence that suggested violence was always just beneath the surface. But he was sitting calmly in his command chair, sipping what appeared to be tea from a ceramic cup. Admiral Lee Vextron began, using the formal tones. "Required by diplomatic protocol, you were not authorized to intervene in this conflict. The Galactic Council was prepared to handle this situation through proper channels." Lee's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone who had seen too much combat to be impressed by bureaucratic posturing. "The Valerians called for help. We helped. Are you here to assist with reconstruction, or do you have other business?" Around the council bridge, staff officers exchanged nervous glances. This wasn't how these conversations were supposed to go. The human should have been apologetic, defensive, eager to explain his actions to proper authority. Instead, he seemed completely unbothered by the presence of a superior force. "The Galactic Council demands your immediate withdrawal," Vextran said, his voice rising slightly. "Your actions constitute unsanctioned military intervention in sovereign space. You have violated 17 different articles of galactic law." Through the view screen, Lee set down his teacup with deliberate care. "Which articles specifically?" The question caught Vextran off guard. Most species simply accepted council authority without demanding details. Article 4, regarding unauthorized military action. Article 12, concerning territorial sovereignty. Article 19, about, did you respond to their distress call? Lee interrupted quietly. The council was preparing an appropriate diplomatic response. "Did you send ships?" Vextran's scales flushed with embarrassment. "The proper committees were reviewing the situation, so that's a no." Lee leaned forward in his chair. "They asked for help. You sent lawyers, we sent Marines. I'm comfortable with that decision." Before Vextran could respond, another voice cut into the transmission. Advisor Thelanara's crystalline form appeared. On the channel, her translucent body pulsing with colors that indicated strong emotion. "Admiral Vextran," she said, her voice carrying crystalline harmonics that made the bridge speakers ring like bells. With respect, the humans responded to our distress call when no one else would. They saved our people and our world. We formally request continued human protection under Article 7 of the Galactic Charter. The words hit the council bridge like an electromagnetic pulse. Every officer froze as the implications sank in. Article 7 was an ancient clause that had been written into the charter during its founding. When the council was smaller and less powerful, it allowed species to request protection from non-council members if the council failed to provide adequate assistance. It had never been invoked before. "Advisor Thelanara," Vextran said carefully, his diplomatic training finally kicking in. "Surely you understand that the council will provide appropriate security measures. We have extensive experience in handling situations like this." Thelanara's crystalline form shifted to deep red, a color that any xenobiologist would recognize as indicating pure anger. "Where were those measures when our people were dying, when our children were screaming in the shelters, while those creatures tore apart our world?" Her voice rose, the harmonics creating a sound like breaking crystal. "Your automated response promised help in 6 standard cycles." 6 cycles. Do you know how many of my people would have died in 6 cycles? The humans came in 12 hours. They didn't send committees or forms or diplomatic inquiries. They sent soldiers who bled and died to save strangers they had never met. Through the view screen, Admiral Lee remained silent, but his presence seemed to fill the channel. Behind him, his officers worked quietly at their stations, monitoring the reconstruction efforts with professional competence. "The humans fought through tunnels that would have crushed your Marines," Thelanara continued, her words cutting through the diplomatic atmosphere like plasma through paper. "They used weapons that could have leveled our cities, but instead they chose precision strikes that saved our infrastructure. They captured enemy technology to study it, not to profit from it." She paused, her crystalline form shifting to a deep blue that indicated absolute determination. "When the battle was over, they didn't claim our world or demand tribute. It asked what we needed to rebuild. They offered medical aid, engineering support, and scientific cooperation. This is what civilization looks like, Admiral, not your paperwork and committees." Vextran felt his carefully constructed diplomatic position crumbling around him. The council had protocols for handling human aggression, human expansion, human conquest. They had no protocols for human altruism. "The council appreciates your gratitude toward the human forces," he said finally. "Surely you can see that proper oversight is necessary." "Oversight." Thelanara's voice cracked like breaking stone. "Where was your oversight when we were being devoured?" "We choose the humans, Admiral. They have proven themselves to be better allies in 1 week than the council has been in 50 years of membership." The transmission cut off, leaving the council bridge in stunned silence. Through the tactical displays, they could see human and Valerian ships moving in coordinated patrols, establishing a defensive perimeter that would make the system nearly impregnable. Admiral Lee's voice came through the speakers one final time, calm and completely unbothered by the political earthquake that had just occurred. Admiral Vextron. You're welcome to remain in the system if you wish to observe reconstruction efforts. But if you're planning to interfere with operations, I suggest you reconsider. We have work to do. The Deathworlders had just rewritten the rules of galactic politics, and they had done it without firing a single shot. The new Valara research station hung in orbit like a crystal jewel wrapped in steel bands. 6 months of joint construction had created something entirely new in galactic architecture. Valerian crystalline technology merged with human military engineering. The station could analyze subatomic particles with impossible precision, while also withstanding a direct hit from a battleship's main guns. Commodore Kim Ji-woo walked through the station's central command center, watching her mixed crew work with an efficiency that would have amazed the galaxy's military experts. At the tactical station, Lieutenant Park Min-ji coordinated sensor sweeps with her Valerian counterpart, analyst Kyle Varen. Their different approaches to data processing, human intuition and Valerian mathematical precision, had created detection systems that could spot hostile fleets days before they arrived. Long-range sensors are picking up increased activity in the outer systems, Kyle Varen reported, his crystalline voice creating harmonics that the station's computers translated into tactical data. 3 separate trade convoys have gone missing. In the past week, Guwu nodded grimly. The swarm attack on New Valara hadn't been an isolated incident. Similar reports were coming in from across the Rim territories, mysterious disappearances, colonies going silent, and survivors telling stories of insectoid creatures that devoured everything in their path. Any response from the council? She asked. The usual. Park Min-ji replied with barely concealed disgust. They're forming a committee to study the threat. Estimated response time is 4 to 6 months. The bridge fell silent as everyone absorbed that information. 4 to 6 months meant dozens of worlds could be consumed before the council even decided what color their report covers should be. The alarm klaxon shattered the quiet, its urgent wail echoing through the station's corridors. Emergency lights bathed everything in red as crew members rushed to their stations. Commodore, we're receiving a priority distress signal from the Karathi system, reported Ensign Park Min-ji, her fingers flying across the holographic controls. It's the mining colonies on Karathi Prime and Karathi Minor. They're under attack by the same swarm species that hit us. Giwu felt ice form in her stomach. The Karathi system was home to nearly 50,000 miners, and their families spread across dozens of asteroid facilities and 3 planetary colonies. If the swarm had found them, ... signal composition and strength. Multiple contacts, ma'am? Looks like at least 20 swarm ships, possibly more. The signal is breaking up, but I'm reading massive structural damage and heavy casualties. Through the command center's main view screen, they could see the human Valerian patrol fleet hanging. In defensive formation around New Valara, 8 human warships worked alongside 6 Valerian science vessels. Their crews trained to fight as a single unit. Giwu smiled, but it was the cold expression of a predator scenting prey. Signal the fleet. Tell Admiral Lee we have another call. To answer, the response came back immediately. Admiral Lee Doyen's weathered face appeared on the screen, his expression already shifting into combat mode. Behind him, the bridge of the Bizen's Thunder buzzed with activity as his crew prepared for hyperspace jump. Karathi system? He asked without preamble. Confirmed, sir. Swarm attack. Multiple colonies under assault. Estimated 50,000 civilians. Lee's jaw tightened. Assemble the fleet. We leave in 1 hour. Across the galaxy. Word was already spreading through channels that the council didn't monitor. Independent traders, Rimworld governors, frontier colonists had created their own communication network, a web of emergency frequencies that carried a simple message. When the established powers failed, the Deathworlders would come. On Theta. Centauri Governor Walsh received a coded transmission and immediately began evacuating his outer settlements. The humans were moving, which meant something big was happening. On the mining station Prospector's Dream, Captain Sarah Chen started plotting emergency jump coordinates. Just in case, the Karathi distress call had reached 17 different species and 4 major galactic powers. 16 of them responded with expressions of concern and promises to file appropriate paperwork. Only one species had ships moving within the hour. Admiral Lee stood on his flagship's bridge as the human Valerian. Alliance fleet prepared to jump. Around him, his mixed crew worked with the precision of a well-oiled machine. Human tactical officers coordinated with Valerian scientists, while human marines trained alongside Valerian technical specialists. All ships report ready for hyperspace jump, announced his communications officer. Through the view screen, Lee could see New Valara hanging in space behind them. The planet's surface glowed with the soft light of rebuilt cities, while it's orbital. Defenses bristled with weapons that merged the best of both species' technologies. It was proof that cooperation could create something stronger than either species could build alone. "Sir," reported the sensor officer, "we're detecting movement from the Council fleet. Admiral Vexteron ships are. They're maintaining position." Lee wasn't surprised. The Council would wait until the situation was resolved, then arrive to claim credit for the victory or blame the humans for the failure. It was how they had operated for centuries. "All ships execute jump," he ordered. The fleet vanished into hyperspace, leaving behind only the gentle glow of disturbed spacetime. They were heading toward another desperate battle, another chance to prove that sometimes the galaxy's most dangerous species were exactly who you wanted answering your distress call. Behind them, New Valara continued its slow rotation, a symbol of what could be accomplished when different species chose cooperation over bureaucracy. The crystalline cities caught the system's twin suns and scattered rainbow light across the void, while human patrol ships maintained their vigilant watch on the research station. The mixed crew continued their work, developing new technologies and sharing knowledge across species barriers. They were building something the Galactic Council had never achieved: true alliance based on mutual respect and proven loyalty. The galaxy was changing, one saved world at a time. The Deathworlders had heard the call, and they would keep answering it no matter how far they had to travel or how dangerous the enemy might be. In a universe where bureaucracy often mattered more than lives, they had chosen a different path. Trust earned in battle, honor proven through action, alliance forged in the fires of combat. The human Valerian fleet raced through hyperspace toward another desperate fight, carrying with them the hopes of 50,000 civilians who had learned the most important lesson in galactic politics. When you really need help, call the humans. They might be dangerous, unpredictable, and completely outside the normal rules of civilization, but they would come. The end.